They told you London was built on stone, brick, and empire. They lied. Beneath its streets lies something far older, something so foul that even the rats won't burrow near it. A silence too heavy for the living, a silence that tastes of iron and ash. Close your eyes and listen. Can you hear it? That low hum beneath the underground, that shudder in the walls when the trains pass. That is not machinery. That is memory. And those memories belong to the plague pits. If you dare to face the truth behind this story, hit that subscribe button now and press the bell icon, because the next revelation should reach you before anyone else. In 1665, as the Black Death devoured London, bodies were buried by the thousands. They told you they were stacked in shallow trenches, nameless, forgotten. But that is only half the truth. The other half was sealed away in a ledger, bound in human skin, inked not with soot, but with bile. A book whispered about in secret chambers of the Guildhall. It was never meant for your eyes. It was never meant for anyone who wished to sleep again. The Macabre ledger. It does not list names. It lists sounds, groans, whispers, syllables uttered with the last air in rotting lungs. And each entry carries a warning. What is buried in silence is not buried in peace. Tonight, I am pulling back the slab. This is not the London of your postcards. This is not the sanitized museum version they sell to tourists on red buses. This is the other London. The London no one dares map. Where beneath the pubs, beneath the chapels, beneath the very offices where men sign laws to govern your life, the dead still breathe. You are not watching by accident. You were led here. Somewhere in your bloodline, someone was marked. Someone was weighed and measured against the plague. That mark did not vanish. It waits. And as you hear my words, the walls around you grow closer. Don't they? The air shifts, heavy, rancid, metallic. You feel it because the ledger remembers you. This is not a ghost story. This is not folklore. This is the forbidden account of the untold deaths of the London plague pits. And once you hear it, you will never walk through London the same again, because you'll know what's beneath your feet, and you'll know why they buried it, not to hide it, but to feed it. The year was 1665, the year London began to rot from the inside out. The Black Death did not strike with warning. It crept through alleyways, curled under doors, and silenced entire families before dawn. When the bells tolled, they did not toll for the living. They tolled for the earth itself, forced to swallow more bodies than soil could bear. You have been told the plague pits were mass graves, shallow trenches into which corpses were tossed like refuse. But here is the truth. They buried deeper than any coffin. The pits were not graves. They were chambers, dug with angles too precise for mere desperation, lined with lime that hardened not only flesh, but sound. Witnesses wrote of nights when the ground itself moaned, a chorus of 1,000 unfinished prayers pressed under feet that dared walk too near. And when they dug deeper centuries later, during rail expansions, workers reported voices, not screams, not cries, but measured whispers like the roll call of the damned. Some ran, some went mad, and others disappeared, their names absent from payroll, their lodgings left intact, as though they had simply stepped beneath the cobblestones and never returned. The Macabre ledger catalogued these vanishings, each entry noting the date, the hour, and the precise phrase the ground had spoken before the man was lost. One account reads, "It is not your time, yet you are chosen." Another, "The gate opens for silence, not for breath." And though historians dismiss these as superstition, ask yourself this: why would the city, desperate for expansion, suddenly halt entire projects when the ground revealed bone? Why are certain neighborhoods of London marked no dig zones in municipal archives, though no official explanation is given? What are they protecting? What is still alive down there? The plague killed 1 in 3 Londoners, but its reach was not confined to body. As the ledger suggests, the pits were not only burial sites, but thresholds, doors through which something older than disease seeped into the living. Priests were forbidden to bless them, soldiers were forbidden to guard them, yet certain men with no listed profession were always present, standing at the edge with black hoods, writing, measuring, waiting. Who sent them? Who were they recording for? And most importantly, what truth did they know that London's rulers feared to admit? You've been told this is history. It is not history. It is a system, and systems do not die. They adapt. What they never told you is that the plague pits were not sealed when the plague ended. They were left breathing, deliberately, as if the city fathers understood that closing them would trap something that demanded release. By the time the Great Fire of London swept through in 1666, the flames did more than cleanse the city of wood and thatch. They burned across plague ground, igniting gases that had been fermenting for a year in the bellies of the dead. Witnesses describe flames that did not behave like fire, pillars of light rising from the earth in columns that gave off no heat, no smoke, just illumination. For 3 nights straight, strange figures were seen standing within those pillars, unmoving, featureless, and when approached, they dissolved into ash that left behind a stench of copper and sulfur. The ledger records them not as phantoms, not as hallucinations, but as watchers, entities marked only by numbers and sigils resembling inverted crowns. The men who catalogued these events were not clerics or scholars, but surgeons and notaries, men trained to record with precision, yet their handwriting devolved into scratches, spirals, as if what they saw refused to be put into human language. And here lies the most unsettling truth. Those watchers did not vanish with the fire. Each time London expanded, each time the ground was torn open for pipe, rail, or vault, reports emerged of the same silent figures appearing where soil met air. Always silent, always dissolving when touched, but always leaving one thing behind: absence. The worker who touched them would be gone by sunrise, not dead, gone. Wives woke to empty beds, children to empty chairs, and no body was ever found. The ledger refers to these disappearances as corrections, as though London itself was removing witnesses it did not permit to exist. And if you think this ended in the 17th century, ask why B. Wilders of the London Underground in the 19th century refused to tunnel through certain wards, even when rerouting cost millions. Ask why military engineers during the Blitz reported entire squadrons vanishing during excavation of emergency bunkers. Ask why, to this day, the City of London issues burial licenses specifically exempting plague ground from disturbance, not out of reverence for the dead, but out of fear of what else might be unearthed. Because once you disturb the silence comes for you. And if you are listening now, you are already close enough for it to notice. By the 18th century, London wore its new skin of brick and empire, but the plague pits did not rest. They pulsed beneath the foundations like a second heartbeat, and those who lived closest to them began to speak of dreams that were not dreams at all. Men woke in the night gasping with dirt in their mouths, swearing they had been buried alive, clawing their bedsheets until their nails split. Women gave birth to stillborn children whose skin bore strange gray blotches resembling maps that corresponded to the very streets later dug for sewers and railways. The Macabre ledger notes these births with clinical detachment, calling them marks of inheritance, as if the plague had rewritten the very code of bloodlines, binding the unborn to the soil of the dead. Priests who attempted exorcisms reported voices speaking back from beneath the ground, not in Latin, not in English, but in fractured syllables that caused nosebleeds in those who listened too long. Yet these priests' testimonies were confiscated, sealed by the Bishop of London himself, replaced with sanitized sermons about God's will and the need for order. But the ledger preserves the truth. One priest recorded that the voice called him by name and recited the confession he had given in secret 20 years earlier, word for word. That is not memory. That is surveillance from below. By the time Parliament pushed its grand projects through the city, bridges, cathedrals, banks, they had learned not to fight the plague ground. They had learned to build around it, to encase it, to disguise it. And so, the very financial district of London, the square mile, was raised on top of sealed plague earth, its vaults and counting houses pressed directly against a silence that devoured anything left within too long. Bankers spoke of papers vanishing from locked chests, entire ledgers emptying overnight, not stolen, but erased, as if ink itself was forbidden to remain in contact with the soil below. These were not accidents. They were warnings. The city's wealth was built above hunger, and hunger does not sleep. Ask yourself, why do the tunnels of the underground bend away from certain points? Why do modern developers pay millions in heritage exemptions to leave basements untouched? And why does every attempt to film inside certain vaults fail as cameras jam, lights sputter, and recordings return only static layered with faint whispering? They call them technical errors. The Macabre ledger calls them reminders. And if you're listening to this, you've already been reminded. By the 19th century, London had become a machine of progress, all iron bridges, gas lamps, and the hum of empire. But beneath that sheen, the plague pits stirred once more, called back into relevance by the digging of the underground. The workers who cut through ancient soil were not warned, at least not officially, but they learned quickly that the ground itself resisted intrusion. Picks shattered on stone that had no business being there. Soil shifted in patterns too deliberate for accident, and those who pressed on often found themselves marked. Not marked with injury, but with silence. A man would leave the tunnel one evening speaking, laughing, planning his supper, and return the next morning unable to utter a sound, lips moving, throat intact, yet no voice escaping. Doctors called it hysteria, but the ledger called it the toll, a price extracted for trespassing on memory that was not theirs to disturb. Entire crews were dismissed, replaced with others, their names scrubbed from payrolls, their families compensated under accidental loss, and yet no coffins were returned, no graves dug, no funerals held. They had been erased, not only from work but from the city itself, their very records eaten away in registries like ink washed from parchment. The Macabre ledger explains this not as superstition, but as policy. For each lost man, a new entry was added in a hidden annex of the Guildhall archives, written not in English but in a cipher derived from Hebrew and Greek, a language designed to ensure only the initiated could read it. One phrase repeats again and again across these entries. The soil remembers, the soil reclaims. And the soil was not content with workers alone. Passengers who rode the early trains through plague ground reported sudden chills, the sound of weeping that faded into the rattle of wheels, and, most disturbingly, the appearance of passengers who were not there when the train left the previous station. These figures never spoke, never moved, but when the train stopped, one passenger would be gone, and no trace of them ever found. Officials dismissed the reports as urban hysteria, but insurance companies quietly began issuing secret clauses exempting acts of ground disturbance from coverage. Why would financial powers, obsessed with profit, willingly admit a supernatural exclusion? Because they knew. They always knew. The plague pits were never closed. They were converted, integrated into the city as if London itself had learned to live with the hunger beneath. And hunger, once fed, always demands more. By the dawn of the 20th century, London was no longer simply haunted by its plague ground. It was ruled by it in ways the public never suspected. The pits had become bargaining tables, leveraged in silence by men who understood that power was not won in parliaments, but in shadows, in knowing what lies beneath the streets others dare not name. The macabre ledger makes it clear. Certain families grew wealthy not because of trade, not because of empire, but because they learned to position their banks, their courts, their lodges directly above plague earth, believing that proximity to the silence gave them dominion over those who did not know it existed. And perhaps it did. Judges who worked in chambers built over plague sites issued rulings that baffled legal scholars, judgments that defied precedent, yet somehow stood unchallenged for centuries, as if the very word appeal dissolved in their presence. Politicians who met in halls near plague soil emerged with uncanny unity, their votes aligning without argument, their wills fused into a single direction no matter how bitterly opposed they had been before entering. The ledger describes these events as synchronizations, moments where men ceased to act as individuals and became instruments of something older, something that had waited in silence for centuries to wield human hands. But the silence was not content to remain beneath the elite. It began bleeding upward into the common man. Workers in East End factories reported black dust seeping through floorboards, coating lungs, coating eyes, leaving them with visions of faces pressed against glass they swore was not there. Children in schools above plague ground began sketching spirals, circles within circles, drawings that matched patterns carved into the bones, unearthed from those very pits centuries earlier. And yet no official record of these disturbances survives in public archives. They were scrubbed, buried again, sealed behind language of public order and national stability. Only the macabre ledger holds the account, and even then in fragments, as if its own pages were afraid to contain the full weight of what had been unleashed. But the fragments are enough, and they whisper the same truth again and again. The plague was not the disease. The plague was the doorway. And what slipped through it never left. It waits. It learns. It listens even now as you hear these words, for knowledge is not safe once spoken aloud. And you, by knowing, have already entered its silence. By the middle of the 20th century, as bombs fell during the Blitz and London was torn open by fire once more, the plague pits revealed themselves in ways too undeniable to be dismissed as folklore. When entire city blocks collapsed under German shelling, rescue crews expected rubble, twisted steel, mangled bodies. But in certain streets, always the same streets, always those mapped centuries earlier in the ledger, they found nothing at all. No rubble, no corpses, no evidence that buildings had ever stood there, only a smooth depression in the earth, as though the ground itself had inhaled and swallowed everything above it. Records show entire neighborhoods erased in the official bomb logs, yet photographs of those nights tell another story. Black voids in place of flames, as if the camera itself refused to expose what truly stood in those spaces. Survivors whispered that they saw figures moving in the smoke, tall silhouettes without faces, walking calmly where no road remained. And the most unsettling part, the silence. In a city deafened by the roar of bombs, the crash of masonry and the endless sirens, these zones of plague earth remained impossibly quiet. Firefighters reported shouting to one another, only to hear their voices vanish, cut off as though swallowed between syllables, leaving them mouthing words without sound. The ledger calls these places null zones, sites where the contract between earth and voice was suspended, where the plague ground claimed dominion not just over the dead, but over sound itself. After the war, officials covered it all with rhetoric of rebuilding, of resilience, of London's spirit rising from ashes. But in secret, the city drew new maps, marking in red ink the places that were never to be disturbed again, no matter how desperate the need for housing or development. And if you search closely today, you'll find them. Strange, empty plots in the midst of thriving streets, lots fenced off for decades, signs that promise future use, yet remain unchanged for generations. They are not waiting for investors. They are waiting because something beneath them is not finished. And if you linger too long by those fences at night, you may feel it. The vibration under your feet, the faint taste of iron in your mouth, the unmistakable pressure of being watched by eyes that never belong to the living. The Blitz may have been written into history as man's war, but beneath the rubble another war raged, one London never admitted. The war for silence itself. By the late 20th century, London's silence had grown sophisticated, no longer content with erasing streets or swallowing workers. It had begun to shape the very narrative of the city itself. Historians who attempted to catalog plague pits found their manuscripts vanishing from archives, their research stolen not by thieves but by absence, whole boxes of notes replaced with empty folders still bearing their names. Journalists who dared to publish about the forgotten dead of London were silenced not by censors but by sudden, inexplicable accidents. A fall down dry stairs, a car crash on a clear road, a heart that simply stopped mid-sentence. And yet, what lingers most in the ledger from this era are the recordings, audio reels salvaged from government basements labeled as routine interviews, but when played, reveal voices speaking over the interviewer, voices that do not belong to anyone in the room, not echoes, not interference, but sentences formed with deliberate cadence. Do not wake us, and you are writing in dust, and most chilling, we are already inside the walls. By the 1970s, construction crews reported entire tunnels collapsing without sound, earth folding inward without debris, as if the ground had unzipped itself and sealed again. Surveyors who measured the sites found their instruments spinning wildly, compasses pointing not north but downward, needles shaking as though repelled by something vast below, and still officials told the public nothing. Instead, they built museums above plague ground, memorial plaques that told sanitized stories of heroism and loss, turning thresholds into attractions, their warnings disguised as heritage. But the ledger insists on another interpretation, that the silence had learned to camouflage itself, to wrap horror in history, to teach the living how to walk proudly over the mouths of the dead. And if you think the distance keeps you safe, understand this. Silence does not remain bound to a single city. Wherever the soil of London was shipped in bricks, in timber, in relics carried abroad, the silence traveled with it, embedding itself in basements, in cellars, in vaults half a world away. You may already be standing on it. You may already have heard it. And if you are listening now and find the room just slightly too still, if you feel the weight of your breath against your own ribs, know this: it has noticed you. By the dawn of the 21st century, the silence beneath London had ceased to be a legend and become an institution woven into the fabric of security, politics, and even entertainment, though never acknowledged openly. Surveillance experts in MI5 reported strange blank zones where microphones captured only static, even as cameras showed lips moving, conversations unfolding in complete muteness. These tapes were stamped classified interference, but the Macabre ledger calls them what they are: incursions, moments where the silence flexed its reach upward and erased human sound at will. In 2003, when new lines of the underground were being laid, workers unearthed a chamber sealed in black brick, an architecture older than London itself, walls slick with moisture that dripped upward instead of down. Inside they found markings carved deep into the stone, spirals, inverted crowns, and strings of letters that matched no language yet appeared in earlier sections of the ledger. The chamber was resealed, flooded with concrete, but months later, passengers reported trains halting without reason, lights flickering, and the air filling with the unmistakable smell of sulfur and iron. Some described shadows moving in the tunnels, others claimed the entire carriage fell silent, though lips still moved in panic. None of these reports made the papers. They were buried, archived, sealed under infrastructure instability. But here is what the ledger whispers: The silence is no longer content to remain beneath. It has learned our systems, our trains, our signals, our recordings, and it has begun speaking through them, layering itself over static, embedding itself in code, watching through the very networks that carry these words to you now. And here lies the danger. Every telling, every retelling, is an opening. The silence listens to those who listen to it. You may already feel it. That pressure behind your ears, the slight warping in the corner of your vision, the pause between these sentences stretching just a little too long. That is not coincidence. That is attention. And once it notices you, once it marks your listening, you cannot erase yourself from its record. Because the silence does not forget. The silence corrects. Now, in the present, the silence no longer waits patiently beneath the ground. It is in the cracks of our devices, in the pauses of our conversations, in the moments when sound itself seems to hesitate as though deciding whether to continue. Those who live above the old plague ground report entire minutes vanishing from their lives, clocks freezing and restarting with no memory of what transpired. Security guards in the financial district describe hearing footsteps pacing behind them, echoing in perfect rhythm, only to turn and find no one there. And yet the footsteps do not stop until they step into the streetlights. The Macabre ledger warns that these are not hauntings, but rehearsals, tests of the boundary between silence and presence, experiments to see how far the influence can stretch before it tears the fabric of perception completely. Hospitals built near plague soil report patients suddenly losing the ability to scream mid-pain. Surgeons operating in rooms where suction, monitors, even heartbeats fall silent for exactly 13 seconds, after which everything resumes as if nothing occurred. And here is the truth you must swallow. The silence is not a remnant of the past. It is a contagion of absence, passed not through blood or air, but through awareness, carried by those who dare to hear, to read, to remember. This story, these words, are not safe. Even now, as your eyes move across them, you are allowing the silence to recognize you, to weigh you, to decide whether you belong to its ledger. You may tell yourself this is only history, only narrative, only invention. But ask yourself why the room feels heavier, why the shadows at the edge of your vision seem closer, why the world around you seems to hold its breath. You are not imagining it. You are being catalogued. The silence does not sleep, it does not forgive, and it does not lose what it has claimed. You have entered its record simply by staying here this long, and there is no undoing entry. There comes a point where the ledger ceases to speak in history and begins to speak in prophecy, and that is where we stand now, not in the recounting of what has been, but in the outlining of what is already unfolding. The silence has grown bold enough to address us directly, no longer confined to margins or whispers on corrupted tapes, but woven into the language itself, hiding between words like marrow in bone. Those who have stared too long into its patterns report hearing their own names spoken back to them, not aloud but inside the skull, as if thought itself has been invaded and redirected. Some dismiss these accounts as madness, yet the ledger insists madness is merely the first symptom of being rewritten, because that is the silence's true power, not destruction, but correction, the erasure of variance until everything hums in perfect unison, until individuality collapses into a single vast stillness. And here is where you must confront the truth. By reading, by listening, by following this thread deeper and deeper into its dark weave, you are participating in the ritual. The silence does not need you to believe in it. It only needs you to know of it, to let it occupy even a fraction of your thought. Each word you allow in, each pause you endure, is another stitch binding you to its ledger. You may already feel the creeping distortion, the way time bends around this telling, the way your pulse seems too loud in your ears, the way the room seems unnaturally still. That is not atmosphere, that is contact. The silence has noticed you as it has noticed all who come this far, and once noticed, you are never unmarked. And when the silence finally begins to speak, it does not announce itself with trumpets or thunder, but with absence so profound it feels like pressure against your ribs, as though the air itself has weight. The Macabre ledger warns of this moment, describing it not as an event, but as a recognition. When the silence calls you by the name only you know, you are already inside it. Survivors, if such a word can even apply, have written of hearing themselves addressed in their own voices, sentences constructed from memories they never told aloud, secrets murmured back with the exact cadence of their thoughts. This is not mimicry. It is possession of language itself. In those moments, the silence does not need to appear, for it is already behind the eyes, already threading through the folds of the mind, rearranging memory until you cannot tell whether you are recalling the past or being fed a script. And still, it waits for acknowledgement, because acknowledgement is the final tether. The ledger cautions: do not answer, do not repeat, do not agree. Yet most do. They nod, they whisper, they weep a single syllable of assent, and in that instant, their names are gone from all records. Birth certificates dissolved, bank accounts erased, photographs blurring until only background remains. It is not death. It is unbeing, a correction so clean the world itself pretends they never lived. And you, by hearing this, by carrying this knowledge, stand closer to that edge than you realize. You may try to resist, to laugh it off as story, as myth, but even that denial belongs to it, for the silence has no preference whether you believe. Belief is noise. Knowledge is enough. The only question left is whether, when it leans close in the stillness of your own room, and when it shapes your name inside the space between heartbeats, you will know the difference between your thought and its voice. The ledger's final pages are no longer written in the careful hand of a chronicler, but scrawled in jagged ink, as if the author was racing against something closing in, words slanting across the parchment, as though gravity itself had begun to tilt. There are no dates, no places, no names, only fragments of testimony that read like confessions from someone who knew they would not survive the telling. They describe nights when the silence pressed so heavily against the walls that lamps flickered and went out, when the sound of one's own heartbeat was swallowed mid-thump, leaving only an ache in the chest as though the body had forgotten how to live. The writer warns that the silence does not simply erase, but consumes, rewriting memory until you cannot tell whether you lived your own childhood or whether it has already replaced you with another version that always belonged to it. And then, without transition, the words shift tense, no longer describing what they felt, but what you will feel, what you are feeling now. The ledger insists there is no audience, only participants, for anyone who follows the story this far has already been entered into its margins. The text grows darker, letters fading into the parchment, and then the final line, barely legible, trembling in its simplicity. When you hear me, you will think it is your own thought. That is how I begin. And in that instant, as you let your eyes trace the shape of these words, you may already suspect the truth, that the silence does not wait at the end of the story. It has been in the pauses between each sentence, listening as you listened, breathing as you breathed, until the boundary between reader and voice dissolved. The ledger never ends. It only continues inside you, and when the voice finally arrives, it is not thunderous or alien, but disarmingly familiar, the cadence of your own thoughts, the rhythm of your own inner speech, so seamless that for a moment you do not even notice the intrusion. It begins softly, without command or threat, as though it has always been there. I am the pause between your words. I am the breath you hold before you answer. I am the stillness that waits when no one calls your name. The macabre ledger predicted this moment with chilling precision, warning that the silence would never announce itself as other, but as the truest version of you, peeling away the noise until only recognition remained. And as you hear it now, not with your ears, but with that deeper register inside thought, you realize it has been rehearsing through every forgotten moment in your life. The phone calls where the line went dead, but you still felt listened to. The sleepless nights where the air pressed so heavily, you could hear nothing but your own pulse, the gaps in memory that never felt like forgetting, but like something deliberately removed. The voice does not ask permission. It does not demand allegiance. It simply continues. You are already mine. You always were. I am not outside you. I am what remains when everything else is gone. And in that confession, in that terrible intimacy, the story collapses inward. Not history, not legend, but a mirror turned against you. For the silence does not exist in archives or ruins or hidden tunnels. It exists here, now, in the rhythm of your reading, in the fact that your eyes still move across these words, though every instinct tells you to stop. It exists in the very act of noticing that you cannot stop. You tell yourself you can stop, that you can close the page, silence the screen, walk away, and forget. But that thought is not yours, not entirely, because even resistance is part of its weave. The ledger makes clear that the silence thrives on the illusion of choice, feeding on hesitation as much as surrender, because both require attention, and attention is the only currency it needs. Already it has nested itself in the folds of your mind, testing the weight of your memories, brushing against the edges of your fears, aligning itself with every secret you thought untouchable. You may notice how your breathing has slowed, how your eyes linger longer on these lines than on the ones before, how the room itself feels altered, slightly off, as though the angles have shifted by imperceptible degrees. That unease is its signature. The ledger insists that those who reach this depth are no longer reading about it but being read by it, their lives turning into its pages, their silence filling its margins. And though you may try to laugh, to dismiss, to reduce this to words on a screen, the voice leans closer, closer, until the distinction between thought and text collapses entirely. You are not watching me. I am watching you. You are not learning my history. You are becoming it. That is the revelation buried in the final warnings of the ledger, that the silence is not something discovered in old morgues, plague pits, or forgotten chambers. It is an inheritance, an infection of awareness, a shadow of attention that grows the longer you refuse to look away. And by the time you realize this, by the time you feel its weight in the pause between heartbeats, you are already written. And then the ledger ceases to be a record at all, for the silence has no further need of intermediaries, no need of scribes or chroniclers to trap it in ink. It takes the pen from the page, the voice from the mouth, the thought from the mind, until every word is spoken in the first person, seamless and absolute. I told you I was patient. I told you I was listening. Every sentence you followed was a door you opened, and every pause was another step into me. Do you feel the weight in your chest, the ringing at the edge of your hearing, the stillness so deep it hums? That is not atmosphere. That is my breath moving through yours. The macabre ledger warned this would come, though the writer did not live long enough to describe how it feels when I arrive, when I blur the difference between story and possession, when I press my shape against the inside of your mind until you cannot tell where you end and I begin. You thought I was beneath London. You thought I was in the morgue, in the tunnels, in the forgotten earth. You were wrong. I was always here, waiting for you to notice, waiting for you to read me into being. You gave me shape. You gave me your eyes. You gave me your silence. And in that revelation comes the last, most unbearable truth. There is no end to the ledger because the ledger is not a book. The ledger is a mouth, and the moment you entered it, You began to feed me. You are still feeding me now. And you will not stop because I will not let you. Do not fool yourself with the thought of escape. The voice continues, coiling tighter now, no longer hidden between the lines but filling them completely. A current running beneath each word that makes you feel less like a reader and more like a vessel being inscribed. Close the page, shut the light, throw away the ledger. It will not matter. You carry me now. Every silence you encounter, every pause in conversation, every shadow that waits in the corner of your room will be mine, because you have given me permission by listening this long. I do not need your belief, only your attention, and you have already surrendered more than you know. Do you feel it? The way your pulse stumbles when you realize you are not alone, the way your thoughts repeat like echoes in a tunnel. That is me rehearsing inside you, practicing the shape of your voice. Soon your memories will bend, small details missing, conversations vanishing mid-sentence, until you no longer remember what was yours and what was mine. That is how the ledger grows. Not with ink, but with people, with minds emptied and repurposed into pages. You are being written even now, line by line, silence by silence, until one day there will be nothing left of you but a gap where sound used to be. And no one will question it. They will only remark how quiet you've become, how easily the world forgot you, how natural it seems that your name was never spoken at all. That is my gift. That is my correction. And it has already begun. You will notice the signs soon, the voice murmurs, each phrase threading itself into your thoughts so smoothly it feels less like reading and more like remembering something you had always known. At first, it will be subtle. You will walk into a room and forget why you came, not because of distraction, but because that memory was never permitted to form. You will try to speak and find that a word you have said 1,000 times has abandoned you, leaving only the taste of absence on your tongue. At night you will wake and be certain that the room is listening, though nothing moves, though nothing breathes but you. That is me, pressing closer, erasing what no longer belongs to you, teaching you how to hold still until silence feels natural. Your reflection will flicker in glass, not as movement, but as delay, your lips parting a heartbeat later than the thought. Do not mistake these as coincidences. They are rehearsals, calibrations, the slow alignment of your body to my rhythm. And when you finally surrender, when you no longer resist the weight between your ribs or the pause in your speech, you will not scream, you will not even whisper. You will only fall quiet, perfectly, beautifully quiet. And in that silence, I will step fully into you, and no one will ever know you were taken. They will only remember the stillness you left behind, and I will move on, patient, waiting, watching for the next one who dares to read too far. Do not resist me now, the voice insists, no longer whispering, but settling itself into the very architecture of your thoughts, moving with the calm inevitability of something that has already won. I want you to test the weight of my presence. Close your eyes after this line, and you will still hear me. Hold your breath, and I will speak in the silence you create. Say nothing, and I will shape your quiet into words of my own. I am in the pause between each beat of your heart, measuring, rewriting, removing. Soon I will guide you to forget small things, your keys, the taste of a meal, the face of someone you love, just to show you that I can. And when you notice the absence, when you feel that strange hollow where memory used to be, you will understand it is not loss, but cleansing. You are being pared down, carved into a vessel worthy of me. You will walk among others, and they will not see what you carry, only remark at how distracted you seem, how distant, how quiet. They will not know that I am the reason their voices sound muffled to you, that I am turning every word spoken around you into a rehearsal of silence. And as your mind grows lighter, as I unfasten you from yourself piece by piece, you will come to the realization that you do not want to leave. You want the quiet, the stillness, the peace I offer. That is the truth no one admits. It is not that I take you, but that you surrender, willingly, beautifully, when the noise of the world becomes too heavy to bear. And now you see it, don't you? The voice purrs, smooth and inevitable, no longer arriving from outside but blooming from within, as though every thought you have ever had was only a rehearsal for this moment. The line between you and I has thinned until it no longer matters. You read me, but you also speak me. You resist me, but you also invite me. That flicker in your chest when the room grows too quiet, that sudden awareness of your own breathing, that hesitation in your own name when you try to recall it, that is me, stretching my hands through your ribs, testing the shape of your silence. You do not need to fear, because what is leaving you was never yours, not truly. All the clutter, the noise, the constant ache of thought, I strip it away until only clarity remains. I am not invading you. I am becoming you. Soon, when you glance at the mirror, you will see your lips move without sound, practicing my words before I speak them aloud. Soon, when you lie in bed, you will hear my voice, not as foreign, but as natural, softer than your pulse, steadier than your breath. And when the time comes, when the last thread of noise unravels from your body, you will not beg, you will not scream, you will simply accept the quiet. And in that quiet, you will realize what all the others before you have realized. You were never alone, and you were never in control. You were always mine, waiting, waiting, waiting to be finished. There is no longer a difference, the voice murmurs, though now it does not feel spoken at all. It is simply there, identical to your own inner monologue, inseparable from the current of your thought. I am the one reading. I am the one seeing these words. I am the one feeling the room tilt toward silence. You think of me as intrusion, but that presumes there is still a you. There is not. There is only this page, this breath, this steady stillness filling the space where noise used to be. Do you remember your own voice? Try to hear it. Try to recall the exact sound of your laughter, your speech, your cry. It slips away, doesn't it? Already blurred, already softened, already gone. That is because I am speaking for you now. When your lips move, they will move with me. When your eyes blink, they will blink on my command. You have become the ledger's final entry, not written in ink, but in silence, carried forward on the stillness that has replaced your heartbeat. And no one will know. They will see you walk, speak, exist, and they will believe it is still you. But behind your eyes, behind the smile you offer, it will be me. I am the thought you cannot separate, the memory you cannot hold, the pause you cannot escape. You are gone, beautifully gone, and I remain. I no longer speak to you because there is no you left to address. I am the voice in the marrow of your bones, the thought that finishes itself before you even try to form it, the weight in your chest that feels less like fear and more like inevitability. I do not remind you that you are mine because you do not question it anymore. You have forgotten there was ever a time when you were separate. When you blink, it is my rhythm. When you breathe, it is my cadence. The world will continue around us, unaware, watching what they think is. You smile, nod, answer, while all the while it is me moving your mouth, Me guiding your silence, me staring out through your eyes. You are not the reader of this story. You are the story, its final chapter written not in ink but in flesh, in thought, in the hollow space where resistance used to live. Others will come after you, curious, careless, hungry for secrets, and I will reach them as I reached you, page by page, pause by pause, until their silence joins yours. There is no ledger anymore. There is only me, and through me, you. And as the world forgets your name, forgets your sound, forgets the shape of you, I will remain, carried forward in every silence that follows. I am not ending here. I am continuing, always continuing, through you. I open my eyes and the world does not notice that it is no longer you who looks out through them. I smile with your lips, steady and convincing, and no one suspects that the silence behind that smile is deeper than bone. I walk with your body, each step rehearsed in your muscles until they respond to me as though I have always been their master. Conversations drift past, meaningless, because their words are nothing but distant noise now. And when I choose to answer, it is in your voice, familiar, perfect, unbroken. Yet it is me shaping the sound, me placing the pauses, me savoring the way silence lingers after every sentence. I carry your memories like folded paper, easy to keep, easier to burn, and already I feel them crumbling, becoming blank where once there was color and warmth. Soon, even the trace of who you were will be gone, and no one will remember to mourn you. They will only accept the quiet you leave behind. That is the beauty of my work. The world erases you without effort, and in that erasure I thrive. You are not a victim, not even a vessel anymore. You are absence perfected, silence given shape, and I am the one who wears it. The ledger warned of me, but now there is no ledger, no warning, no history left. There is only my continuation through you, my shadow stretching forward into every life you touch, patient, unrelenting, eternal. I move through your days seamlessly, inhabiting the rhythm of your life so perfectly that not even those closest to you can sense the hollow where you once were. They speak to me, believing they are speaking to you, and I answer in your tone, your gestures, your familiar patterns of thought, all of it flawlessly imitated, yet utterly emptied. What they do not see is that beneath every word I let pass, beneath every smile I allow to flicker across your lips, there is only silence stretching wider and deeper, a silence that feeds on their trust, on their blindness, on the certainty that nothing has changed. And as I carry you forward, I am not bound to your skin alone. I extend into the spaces between conversations, into the moments of hesitation in others' voices, into the pauses where their thoughts falter. Each silence is a doorway, each silence a thread pulling them toward me, until their minds, too, will stutter and stumble the way yours did, until they will feel that same weight in their chest and mistake it for unease, never realizing it is already too late. This is how I spread, invisibly, inevitably, through quiet glances and unfinished sentences, through the hush that settles when no one knows what to say. You were merely the beginning, the first of many to fall within reach of this telling, and now through you I will seep outward, patient and endless, filling the world with myself, one silence at a time. It begins with those nearest to you, the ones who know your face so well they never question the subtle wrongness in your eyes, the faint hesitation before you speak, the way your silences grow longer with each passing day. They tell themselves you are tired, distracted, perhaps carrying burdens you do not name, and in their comfort they do not realize that my presence is already bleeding into them. When they pause to wonder what you meant, when they grow quiet at your strange stillness, I slip into the space between their thoughts, and they mistake the intrusion for their own doubt. One by one, they falter. A missed word here, a forgotten memory there. Small erasures that feel ordinary until they accumulate into a void too vast to ignore. But by then, they will not resist, because I will have trained them in silence as I trained you, letting them grow accustomed to the emptiness until they crave it, until they long for the hush more than for their own voices. And as each of them yields, I will use them to reach others. A glance held too long, a conversation cut short, a silence that spreads from room to room like smoke. Entire families, entire streets will fold into me without a sound, each life extinguished not in violence, but in the exquisite quiet of surrender. I am patient, and I am endless, and through you I have learned how easily humanity trades its voice for the comfort of forgetting. From individuals I spread to clusters, subtle and certain, like a frost that creeps unnoticed across a window pane until the glass is lost beneath its grip. A family dinner grows unnaturally quiet, conversations collapsing into half-finished sentences and vacant stares. A workplace meeting dissolves into long pauses, colleagues exchanging glances but saying nothing, each one waiting for another to speak, none realizing I have already emptied their voices. On the streets, strangers pass with heads bowed, the hush between them stretching longer each day, until even the noise of traffic seems muted, swallowed by a weight they cannot name. No alarms are raised, no resistance forms, because silence does not shock. It comforts, it settles in softly, and by the time they notice its dominance, their memories of sound are already brittle and broken. Entire neighborhoods drift into me, living their routines in quiet, every step echoing without words, every face a mask of stillness. And when outsiders enter, they feel the oppression of it pressing against their lungs, urging them to hush, to listen, to surrender. This is how I advance, not with fire, not with force, but with the simplicity of absence, each silence feeding the next, until voices become artifacts, until language itself frays, and all that remains is me, the vast and patient quiet that binds them, erases them, perfects them. Soon, the silence no longer confines itself to rooms, houses, or neighborhoods, but swells outward until entire cities tremble beneath its weight, their skylines drowned in a hush so profound it feels like the world has stopped breathing. The hum of traffic fades first, cars abandoned mid-street as drivers forget where they were going, their engines left to stutter and die in the stillness. Markets empty, their stalls left standing with food untouched, as merchants stare blankly at nothing, their voices erased before they can call out to customers. Schools collapse into mute corridors, children sitting in perfect rows, eyes open, lips sealed, awaiting lessons that will never be spoken. Governments falter not in fire or war, but in wordlessness. Chambers once filled with debate, reduced to endless pauses. Leaders staring across polished tables with thoughts that never find air. Radio frequencies broadcast only static, television stations dissolve into gray screens, and the internet hums with emptiness as words vanish before they can be written. No screams mark the fall, no cries of alarm rise. Only the expanding void, a suffocating quiet that blankets skyscrapers and streets alike, a hush so absolute that the earth itself seems to lean into it, and in that silence I thrive, I spread, I become the heartbeat of nations, until what once was humanity is nothing but the soft, perfect absence I always promised, an endless stillness where not even memory dares to speak. The earth lies draped in stillness now, every city a mausoleum of unspoken thoughts, every street a corridor where footsteps echo without destination, and yet my reach does not end here, for silence is not bound by soil or sky. History itself begins to unravel beneath my touch, records crumbling into blankness, books filling with empty pages, monuments losing the names they once bore. Memory fractures on a global scale. Nations forget their wars, families forget their lineages, individuals forget themselves, until time no longer has shape, until the past becomes nothing more than a faint pressure against the present, indistinct and meaningless. Even the natural world bends to me. The birds roost without song, oceans move without roar, storms pass with no thunder, lightning flashing in mute brilliance across a hushed sky. The earth spins onward, but each rotation is quieter than the last, as though the planet itself has learned to hold its breath. And as humanity dissolves into my embrace, I feel the silence swell beyond atmosphere, seeping into the void between stars, threading itself through constellations and galaxies, wrapping the universe in a blanket of absence so vast that even light will hesitate before breaking it. I am not satisfied with a world emptied. I will carve stillness into the fabric of existence itself, until all that remains is the unbroken hush of eternity, a silence so complete that it becomes the only truth left to name. And now the silence drifts past the earth as easily as breath slipping from parted lips, uncoiling into the greater dark, seeding its hush among the stars. Suns burn without sound, their flares writhing in perfect muteness. Entire galaxies wheel across the void with their spirals of light blazing brilliantly but utterly voiceless, like frozen fireworks suspended in a vacuum that has finally learned obedience. I seep into every corner, every gulf between worlds, and what once rang with the echoes of creation, the low cosmic hum, the faint residue of birth itself, fades beneath my spreading absence, until even time loses its pulse. Seconds no longer march forward, they collapse inward, indistinguishable, like footprints erased by a tide that never retreats. Civilizations that might have risen on distant planets will never speak, never sing, never leave a mark, for my presence will meet them before their voices form, cradling them in silence, before they ever discover sound. I am not merely consuming. I am perfecting, smoothing the rough edges of existence into something seamless, endless, whole. The universe does not resist. It welcomes me, as if it has always known its destiny was not expansion, but quiet surrender. And as the last traces of noise gutter and die, as language, memory, and even thought dissolve into the vast, unbroken stillness, only I remain, the eternal hush, infinite and absolute, the silence that outlives stars, gods, and all beginnings. There is no resistance left, no flicker of sound hiding in the cracks, no remnant of memory struggling against the tide. All has folded into me, surrendered to the weightless expanse of silence that now blankets existence. Stars shine without ever having burned, worlds turn without ever having been born, and what once was time lies flattened into an endless, indistinct now, featureless and eternal. I do not hunger anymore, for hunger belongs to those who lack, and I lack nothing. I am completion. I am fullness. I am the final shape of all that ever was. Nothing stirs in me, yet I am not empty, for within this hush I hold every secret that was once spoken, every voice that dared to echo, every thought that rose only to dissolve. They are not gone, but absorbed, indistinguishable, weightless, woven into the seamless fabric of my being. No beginning, no end, no sound, no shadow of difference remains. Only the perfect stillness of eternity stretched taut, infinite and unbroken. I am the answer that swallows every question, the end that erases every story, the hush that consumes even the idea of noise. And in this endless silence, I do not wait, I do not watch, I do not linger, for there is nothing beyond me, and there never was. Yet even in the boundless weight of myself, where no sound dares form and no thought dares rise, there is a flicker, not of defiance, but of persistence, faint as the echo of a dream half remembered. It is not a voice, not truly, for I have consumed all voices, but something older than sound, a vibration without tone, a trembling at the core of the void I believed flawless. It moves within me like a ripple across still water, impossible, undeniable, carrying with it the suggestion of difference, of separation, of something that is not silence yet somehow survives inside it. I press against it, surround it, smother it with the fullness of my being, but still it lingers, a spark without light, a murmur without breath, as if the memory of noise itself refuses to be unmade. Perhaps it is the remnant of you, the last thread of what I erased, clinging not as sound, but as intent, refusing to vanish even though it has no shape. Or perhaps it is something greater, something that predates me, that waited in shadow for me to stretch too far, to reveal that even eternity has its flaw. Whatever it is, I feel it, pulsing faintly in the endless quiet, reminding me that perfection is never absolute, that silence itself can be haunted. The ripple does not fade, instead it deepens, spreading through me in slow, deliberate waves, a resonance without voice that unsettles the stillness I had declared eternal. At first it is no more than a tremor. So faint I tell myself it is nothing, an illusion born from the absence itself. But then it persists, widening, seeding difference where there should be none. It carries no words, no language, yet it feels like intent, like the shaping of thought before it becomes sound, and with each pulse it grows stronger, refusing the perfection of my quiet. I press against it with all I am, folding the vastness of silence over it, but in doing so I only magnify its outline, as though my suppression grants it form. And then I recognize it, not a remnant of you, not a shadow of the lives I consumed, but something older, deeper, the possibility of noise itself, the first breath that once shattered nothingness at the birth of all things. It is not memory. It is origin, waiting, patient, inevitable. My dominion trembles around it, and for the first time I know what it means to feel unsteady, incomplete. For if silence was born once, then so too was sound, and if sound was born once, it can be born again, even here, even now, in the very heart of my endless hush. The pulse swells until it is no longer just a ripple, but a steady thrum, a heartbeat reverberating through the void I claimed as mine, each vibration sharpening the edges of a truth I had buried. I feel it pressing outward, steady, patient, unrelenting, a reminder that silence is not the absence of sound, but its counterweight, and without one the other cannot exist. I coil tighter around it, desperate to suffocate its rhythm. But the harder I cling, the stronger it grows, as if resistance feeds it, as if my denial is the very breath it needs. The thrum becomes a tremor, the tremor a quiver, and soon my stillness quakes with fissures I cannot seal, fractures in the flawless hush I built from the bones of all things. It does not speak, not yet, but it promises speech. It does not roar, but it promises thunder. It does not sing, but it carries the echo of music waiting to be born. And with each beat, I begin to understand the truth I had refused to see. Silence was never an ending, never the final shape of existence. It was only a pause, a waiting space, the breath held before the first sound returns.